Mr. President, last week, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, the hardline military force that answers only to Iran's supreme leader and is committed to the preservation of Iran's revolutionary regime, launched a number of ballistic missiles in clear violation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231. These missile launches are profoundly disturbing and suggest a regime that is intent on continuing to destabilize the region and to threaten our vital allies, its neighbors. But they don't technically violate the terms of last summer's nuclear agreement, but they do serve as a vital reminder that Iran remains a revolutionary regime that does not respect world opinion and does not share our values or interests. America and our allies must seek every opportunity to push back on Iran's aggressive behavior, especially behavior like this that is outside the parameters of the nuclear deal, by enforcing existing sanctions on Iran's illegal ballistic missile tests, its ongoing human rights abuses, and its support for terrorism across the Middle East and the world. Another critical way that the international community can demonstrate we are serious about holding Iran accountable is by aggressively enforcing the terms of the nuclear deal. Today, I'd like to discuss a key element of enforcing that deal: fully funding the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, the world's nuclear watchdog, which is responsible for monitoring Iran's compliance with the deal. The case for providing robust, sustainable funding for the IAEA is further strengthened by a second topic I'll discuss: Iran's continued human rights abuses. Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal so far does not mean that its government intends to embrace the international community or heed the call of the Iranian people for greater democracy. In fact, I believe the actions of the IRGC and Iran's hardline conservative leaders indicate that the Iranian regime intends to continue to repress dissent, to block democratic reforms, to incite anti-Semitism, and to violate basic human rights. Mr. President, in a speech to the United Nations in December of 1953, President Eisenhower proclaimed American support for a new international organization tasked with putting nuclear technology, quote, into the hands of those who will know how to strip its military casing and adapt it to the arts of peace, close quote. Since its founding in 1957, the IAEA has undertaken a broad array of responsibilities, from promoting international non-proliferation efforts to supporting peaceful nuclear power, but none more vital than maintaining its safeguards program, which provides credible assurances that countries are honoring their international obligations to use nuclear technology and material only for peaceful purposes. The IAEA could not do its job without the ongoing full support of the United States. The United States develops the inspections technologies on which the IAEA vitally depends, and we train and support the IAEA's inspectors, scientists, and staff, particularly through our system of national laboratories. Since 1980, every single IAEA inspector has been trained at least once in the Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico. And at any one given time, roughly 20% of all the inspectors that work for the IAEA are undergoing training or retraining at the vital national labs of the United States. So, Mr. President, the commitment made by American scientists and taxpayers to the IAEA is even more important now in light of the agreement reached by world powers last summer to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. In this agreement, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, the IAEA is given unprecedented access to monitor Iran's nuclear efforts through highly intrusive physical inspections and 24/7 remote monitoring technology. Unlike previous nuclear agreements, the JCPOA requires Iran to allow the IAEA to monitor Iran's entire nuclear fuel cycle, which includes all the steps required to go from mining and milling raw uranium to producing centrifuges that enrich uranium to the actual enrichment sites. The IAEA's regular inspections and continuous monitoring and oversight mean that the international community will know if Iran tries to cheat on the terms of the JCPOA before it can dash to a nuclear weapon or build a bomb in secret. But access alone is not enough. the IAEA must have the resources to actually inspect, monitor, and verify Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal by confirming that Iran's nuclear declarations are accurate and comprehensive, by monitoring their declared sites to ensure Iran's behavior actually complies with the terms of the JCPOA, and by tracking all nuclear-related material, leaving every facility to make sure Iran doesn't divert and pursue illicit nuclear activities elsewhere in their country. Given Iran's long record of cheating and of pursuing nuclear weapons illicitly over the decades past, investing resources in ensuring the IAEA can take advantage of this unprecedented opportunity is a wise investment, not just for the American people, but for the world. So to fulfill these responsibilities, in addition to its regular and ongoing mission of ensuring nonproliferation in every other country in the world, the IAEA must have the resources to turn access into oversight. So back in January, I traveled with 7 other senators to the IAEA's headquarters in Vienna, Austria. And there we heard directly from Director General Yukiya Amano about the challenges the agency faces in fulfilling its new responsibilities under the JCPOA. And at the top of that list of challenges is securing a reliable, long-term source of funding. A recent report by our own nonpartisan Government Accountability Office here in the United States echoes those very same concerns, stating that the IAEA faces potential budgetary and human resource management challenges stemming from the JCPOA-related workload. Effectively enforcing the terms of the JCPOA will require more than just additional inspectors. While inspectors are vital, the IAEA will also be required to train a new generation of nuclear scientists and to continue to develop more and more innovative nuclear detection and monitoring technologies as well, an undertaking as complex as it is important. So that's why, Mr. President, I urge Congress to increase America's voluntary contribution to the IAEA to a level at least $10.6 million above the President's fiscal year 2017 request, and commit to a sustained and long-term investment so that we can be confident that the IAEA has the resources to recruit, to train, and to place the very best inspectors the world can produce. The increase of $10.6 million that I'm urging will provide reliable funding for the IAEA, the funding they need to monitor the Iranian nuclear program while continuing to work for a safe, secure, and peaceful use of nuclear technology throughout the rest of the world. Now, an additional $10 million would not crowd out contributions from other states. American representatives at the UN offices in Vienna could direct extra funding to specific projects or withhold it from others, allowing us to address unanticipated needs by the IAEA without discouraging other donors from fulfilling their obligations as they should. We also need to continue to insist on full transparency so that reports received by the IAEA, things they might learn, are shared with the United States, with our intelligence community, with our lawmakers, with our executive branch, and to ensure, frankly, that we know if there are additional classified or secret agreements, side agreements between the IAEA and Iran. Look, whether my colleagues supported the JCPOA or opposed it, surely we can agree that it's in America's interest to see the IAEA succeed in monitoring Iran's behavior and attracting the best and brightest young scientists from around the world for years to come. As Brent Scowcroft, who served ably as National Security Advisor to both President Gerald Ford and later President George H.W. Bush, wrote in an August 21 Washington Post op-ed, Congress should ensure that the International Atomic Energy Agency and other relevant bodies and U.S. intelligence agencies have all the resources necessary to facilitate inspection and monitor compliance with the nuclear deal by Iran. To fully and sustainably fund the IAEA is to make a sound investment in a highly technical organization that directly contributes to international peace and our security. But, Mr. President, why exactly is it so important that we fund the IAEA, enforce the JCPOA, and push back on Iran at every opportunity? A brief review of Iran's dismal human rights record might reinforce why it is crystal clear this is a priority for our nation and must remain so. Iran's government continues to preach anti-Semitism, to incite hatred against Israel, and to call for the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel and uses state-run media to blame the Jewish people for the instability and violence that currently dominates the Middle East. Just last week, one of the ballistic missiles Iran illegally launched supposedly had a message printed on the side in Hebrew saying Israel must be wiped off the earth. In January, as the international community marked Holocaust Remembrance Day, Iran's supreme leader published a video on his official website in which the narrator condemns the world for supporting Israel and questions the legitimacy and magnitude of the Holocaust. These statements should deeply concern and outrage the world community, but they are simply another reflection of the Iranian regime's long-standing disregard for international values and human rights. Earlier this month, the United Nations issued a report showing that the number of people executed by the Iranian government skyrocketed to nearly 1,000 last year, twice as many as in 2010, 10 times as many as in 2005. Most of these executions were allegedly for drug-related offenses. According to some reports, last year, one village in Iran saw every single adult male, every single one in the entire village, executed for so-called drug crimes. These alarming statistics follow a January report from Amnesty International that documented Iran's execution of over 70 juveniles in the decade from 2005 to 2015, with another 160 young juvenile offenders still on death row. No country in the world uses capital punishment for minors more than Iran. And despite Iran's ratification of an international treaty banning capital punishment for minors, Iranian law still allows the death penalty for girls as young as 9 and boys as young as 15. In addition, Iran's unelected Guardian Council suppressed democracy in its most recent elections, preventing the vast majority of either female or reform-minded candidates from even appearing on ballots. And Iran has illegally and inappropriately detained American citizens, including retired FBI agent Robert Levinson and Iranian-American energy executive Siamak Namazi, both of whom we believe remain detained in Iran. The Committee to Protect Journalists estimates that at least 19 reporters are today still being held unjustly by the Iranian government. These are just a few, Mr. President, examples among countless many of Iran's unwillingness to respect even the most basic norms of international human rights. And effectively pushing back on these egregious human rights abuses and enforcing the JCPOA demands international collaboration. But increasing our voluntary contribution to the IAEA makes a direct impact without requiring approval or action by any other country. Well, Mr. President, there are two other additional unilateral steps this Congress can take today. First, we can increase federal investment in our national laboratories, which train the IAEA inspectors I spoke about. They develop technologies that nuclear inspectors would depend on and undertake research that can improve the lives of people around the world. Second, and more promptly, the Senate could and should confirm Laura Holgate, a non-proliferation expert who was nominated more than 5 months ago to serve as America's ambassador to the UN agencies in Vienna, which includes the IAEA. After months of delays for purely political reasons, her nomination was finally approved by the Foreign Relations Committee on January 28th. The full Senate should not delay any further to ensure that our government is represented at the very organization the world relies upon to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. Madam President, later this month, the President will convene heads of state from around the world for a 4th Nuclear Security Summit, a conference dedicated to preventing nuclear terrorism and securing stockpiles of nuclear material from around the world. The IAEA is at the very forefront of this vital mission, and we need to work together to make sure it has the tools it needs to take on these serious tasks. These goals demand involvement from every actor in the international stage, but by increasing America's voluntary contribution to the IAEA by an additional $10 million, Congress can send a strong signal that we intend to hold Iran to the terms of the JCPOA, to support the international cause of nonproliferation, and to provide a vital incentive for our international partners to dedicate more of their resources to this important agency. Iran remains today a revolutionary regime, fundamentally opposed to America's values and interests. And Iran's ballistic missile tests just last week serve as another reminder that the Iranian government is neither America's friend nor ally. We must be relentless in our efforts to push back on these missile tests, on Iran's destabilizing support for terrorism, and on its human rights abuses. We must continue to enforce the existing sanctions in American law and be willing to consider imposing new ones when Iran's behavior warrants it. Let me be clear about one thing in closing. The Persian culture, the culture of the people of Iran, is one of great richness and complexity. I've had the blessing of knowing many Persian Americans in my life and have known them to be people of great intellect and inventiveness and capability, and to be the products of an ancient and respectable culture. We in the United States do not wish the people of Iran ill, but the Iranian regime and those who support it deserve international condemnation for a decades-long pattern of human rights abuses, support for terrorism, and other bad behavior. But we can and should make a distinction between the Iranian regime and the Persian people. The people of Iran, those who turn out at the polls to vote, even in elections that are neither free nor fair, and who have repeatedly demonstrated in the streets for democracy and engagement, risking life and limb to do so in the decade past, must know the American people support the struggle of those who hope for real democracy someday in Iran, and those who hope for an Iranian regime that someday respects international values and human rights. So today, just a few days before Monday's Iranian New Year of Nowruz, we wish the people of Iran a happy, healthy, and peaceful New Year, while continuing to stand firm against the values and actions of the Iranian regime.